Apple TV's Foundation is an epic sci-fi story spanning several centuries based off the 1951 trilogy by Isaac Asimov. The premise is somewhat simple. A brilliant mathematician by the name of Harry Seldon has created a mathematical equation that can predict the future, and this future does not look good. According to Harry, if humanity fails to make drastic changes, it will endure 30,000 years of war and destruction. This doesn't sit well with the current ruler of the Empire, who believes Harry's claims to be treasonous and an affront to his power. This is Brother Day, also known as the Emperor. He's a member of what is known as the Genetic Dynasty, a long line of clones that have held on to power for over 400 years. When one of them gets old, they pass power on to a younger copy, so at any one time there are at least 3 emperors of varying ages: Brother Dawn, Brother Day, and Brother Dusk. Absolute power is consolidated through Brother Day. They're based off of the first emperor, known as Cleon I, and this ensures the empire is ruled by a constant and consistent hand. But this also has its downsides. At the end of episode 1, a group of insurgents blow up the Starbridge, a massive tower that transports people from space to the planet Trantor's surface. Planet Trantor is the Empire's home planet. This attack causes 100 million deaths and only emboldens the Emperor to take action against Harry, who sees the attack as the first of many catastrophes to befall humanity in the upcoming Age of Darkness. But Brother Day is smart. Instead of executing Harry, he decides to exile him to a planet on the outer reaches known as Terminus. His intention is to let him continue his work, and should Harry's predictions come true, use it to further increase his power. What greater weapon for an emperor than a formula that can predict the future? This mathematical equation is part of what is called psychohistory.
Psychohistory is a predictive model designed to forecast the behavior of very large populations.
So Harry is tasked with starting a colony on Terminus and establishing what is known as the Foundation. The thinking here is that when civilization crumbles, as he has predicted, humanity will need something to build on. Rather than start from nothing, they'll have a foundation, a giant encyclopedia of sorts containing all of humanity's greatest achievements and technologies. He says that with a successful foundation, this Age of Darkness can be reduced from 30,000 years to 1,000. For the Emperor, exiling Harry is a win-win. If it turns out Harry's predictions are rubbish, he's already exiled. If it turns out they're true, he can use it to further bolster his own power. In episode 2, while en route to Terminus, Harry Seldon is killed by his adopted son, Raish. But unbeknownst to the crew, this is all an elaborate plan for something far greater, a plan that will see the overthrow of the Empire and the end of its tyrannical rule. This leads us to the events of the season's final episode, which starts with Harry's casket being shot out into space. Prior to his death, a death orchestrated by Harry himself, he took a pill containing millions of self-replicating molecular machines. These machines broke his body down and became one with his casket, creating what is known as the Vault. The Vault landed on Terminus before the settlement arrived, and no one could really examine it because of a self-defense feature known as the Null Field. It's an invisible force which, when one would get close to it, would make them pass out. There was one person, however, who was impervious to this field. That's Salvor Hardin, the Warden of Terminus, but we'll get to her in a bit. As we begin the final episode, 2 rival factions have arrived on Terminus, bringing their centuries-long hatred of one another to the planet. These are the Anacreons and Thesmans, and it looks as though all-out war is imminent if it weren't for the arrival of Harry Seldon emerging from the Vault. It's not the real Harry Seldon, more so a manifestation of his consciousness. And this was all part of his plan, to create a new civilization not ruled by one voice like the Empire, but of many. He goes on to say,
But the Foundation was never about curating knowledge. It was about curating people.
But how does he hope to manage this with these 2 factions who absolutely hate each other? Throughout the course of the season, the show has stressed the importance of history, how whoever writes it can turn a villain into a hero and a liar into a truth teller. This is what happened centuries ago with Cleon II, the first of the Genetic Dynasty clones. He had these 2 upstart kingdoms, the Anacreons and Thesmans, who were only getting more powerful by joining their 2 kingdoms through marriage, so he orchestrated a murder involving the royals to make it look like one of the kingdoms backstabbed the other, and voila, he rewrote history in his favor.
Why fight 2 upstart kingdoms when you can exploit their racial animus and have them fight each other?
Harry believes that if they all join together, they can bring about the downfall of the Empire and create a new civilization that will withstand the dark times to come. They even have their hands on the Invictus, the Empire's largest weapon, which went missing 700 years ago and was deemed lost for good. But this is just a starting point. Back on Trantor, Brother Day decides the fate of Brother Dawn, who we found out was unwillingly involved in a plot to overthrow the Empire. Over the course of the season, Brother Dawn fell in love with one of his servants, a gardener by the name of Azura. He confided in her that he's not like his brothers. He's colorblind and left-handed, but how could this be? He's supposed to be an exact copy. This doubt led him to escape, fearing if his brothers found out about his differences, they would kill him. So he seeks refuge with Azura, only to be betrayed by her. She's part of a resistance, the one responsible for genetically modifying his DNA, meaning someone on the inside must have had access to the genetic tanks in which their bodies are made. This is a plan that was years in the making, and the only person I can think of who would have access is their servant Demerzel. This is interesting for a number of reasons. First, Demerzel is supposed to be programmed never to bring harm to a member of the genetic dynasty, but on the other hand, she does have motive to bring harm. She is the last of her kind. Her fellow robots were killed by the very dynasty she is sworn to protect. She is also a devout believer in Luminism, a religion which almost elected a woman by the name of Zephyr Halima, who is an enemy to the Empire. In episodes 6 through 8, we see how Brother Day tries to sway the vote away from Halima to someone more in line with the Emperor. That's because Halima believes in something called the Primary Octavo, a heretic scripture that links the soul to individual sentience. In other words, because the Emperor is a copy, he does not possess a soul. Therefore, he is incapable of change. This would put the Emperor in direct conflict with the very tenets of Luminism, tenets that believe change is natural and therefore a holy progression. And Luminism has 3 trillion followers, so he can't afford to start a war with them. So to get over this hurdle, Brother Day embarks on the Spiral, a 170-kilometer holy trek through scorching desert which few survive. It is said that those who make it to the end are granted a vision. Now here is where Brother Day, like his ancestors, rewrites history. He does make it to the end, but lies about his vision, stating that he saw a birth root. A birth root is deeply linked to the creation of the Luminism religion, and his vision is interpreted by the Ring of Zephyrs as being a holy indication that his soul is not one of stagnation. Of course, we learn later that this was all a lie. Brother Day received no such vision when he reached the end of the spiral. As Demerzel says of those who don't receive a vision,
"Seeing nothing, I would not wish that emptiness on anyone."
Thousands of years ago, Demerzel completed the spiral and she herself received a vision, but we never find out what that vision is. If she is in fact working against the Empire, it could have something to do with that. After all, when she suddenly kills Brother Dawn, who was going to be spared by Brother Day for his involvement in the overthrow, she rips off her face in anguish. Perhaps something she had spent several years planning was coming undone. As we learned later in the episode, the Shadow Master informs Brother Day that not only Brother Dawn's DNA has been changed, but also his own. The rebels have tainted all the copies. However, Brother Dusk is currently being tested, so he might be the last pure copy. And it makes sense that Brother Day's DNA has been changed. Any previous clone would have opted to kill Brother Dawn, but Brother Day was going to spare him. As Demerzel says about all the clones in episode 2,
"How often do we choose this?"
You always do.
Brother Day choosing the non-violent option indicates something has changed. With things settling down on Terminus, Salvor Hardin begins her search for answers. She's been experiencing these visions, both of a young boy and girl, but isn't sure where they're coming from. We learn that Salvor was the result of her mother being in vitro fertilized with Gale Dornick's egg and Raish Selden's sperm. Eggs and sperm would have been stored as part of the colony's seed program, although the show doesn't really go into much depth as to Salvor's mother's motivation here. Those visions of a young boy and girl were of her mother and father, Gale and Raish. This revelation causes Salvor to take off in the middle of the night with her lover Hugo's ship, the Beggar. They have a tearful goodbye, and she tells him she has a lead on where to go. This ends up being her biological mother's planet of Synax. Speaking of her mother, Gale Dornick has gone on her own crazy journey this season. She won a math competition by solving the Abraxas conjecture, a problem which hadn't been solved in 500 years. This put her her in touch with Harry Seldon, who she'd later be accused of being complicit in his murder, forcing her to escape the colony ship. This would lead her to a secret ship which was meant for Ra's, and the discovery of Harry Seldon's consciousness embedded in the very weapon that was used to kill him. It's here we learn there is a second foundation on Harry's homeworld of Helicon. We never get to see what happens on Helicon as Gale forces her way off the ship, tired of being lied and manipulated to by Harry. She ends up putting herself back in cryo and traveling back to Synnax, a journey that takes her 138 years. There she finds her homeworld has succumbed to rising sea levels, something that was hinted at earlier on in the season, and as she finds her home underwater, she notices a blinking light, a light which will lead her to a pod containing her daughter, Salvor Hardin. We aren't exactly sure how she got here, or for how long, but with the Foundation being renewed for Season 2, we'll be sure to find out. This leaves us with 3 major storylines to jump off from: Brother Day and Demerzel, the citizens of Foundation, and Gale and Salvor. I thought it was quite curious when they showed Gale still had Raish's dagger, a dagger that contained Harry Seldon's consciousness, so I wouldn't be surprised if Harry and Gale will be reunited once again, whether it be on Synnax or elsewhere. But I want to hear what you thought of this first season of Foundation. Was it enough to keep you intrigued, and what do you think will happen in Season 2? Thanks for watching, be sure to like and subscribe, and for more bad takes you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at ThinkStoryYT. Until next time, remember, Daddy loves you very much.